Why? Naomi stepped closer, into his space, tilting her head back to meet his eyes, her voice breaking. Why me? There are thousands of women in Seoul who would want you, who wouldn't come with all this danger and complications. So why me? Because you made me feel alive. Dojin's voice turned raw, all his careful control cracking. For over a year, I was broken, hollow, going through motions. Then I saw you fight for a stranger with everything you had, and something cracked open inside me. His hands came up, hovering near her face, but not quite touching, trembling slightly. You healed something doctors said was impossible. That's not love, Dojin, Naomi said, but her voice was softer now, her anger fading into something more complicated. That's gratitude. Obsession, maybe. Her own hands came up to cover his, pressing his palms to her cheeks, feeling the rough texture of his tattoos against her fingers. Maybe it started that way, he admitted, his thumbs stroking her cheekbones, feeling wetness there, tears she hadn't realized she'd shed. But it's become more. You challenge me. You see me as human, not a monster. You think I can change. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. No one's believed that in 15 years, Naomi. Can you? Her eyes searched his in the dim lamplight. Can you actually change? I don't know, he said honestly, his forehead dropping to rest against hers, their breath mingling in the small space between them. But I want to try. For you. Because of you. His hands slid into her hair, cradling her head with a gentleness that belied the violence she knew he was capable of. The kiss happened like a collision, desperate and consuming. Naomi melted into him, all her medical logic drowning under waves of desire and need, and something deeper she didn't have words for. His body was hard against hers, his hands tangling in her braids with desperate urgency, his mouth claiming hers like he was trying to brand her soul. She kissed back with equal desperation, her hands sliding under his jacket, to feel the heat of him, the solid reality of him, the racing of his heart that matched her own. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Naomi pressed her forehead to his chest, feeling his heart hammering against her cheek. This is insane, she whispered. I know, he agreed, his arms wrapping around her, holding her like she might disappear. You're dangerous. I know. His voice was rough against her hair. People will die because of us. Maybe. Probably. Dojin tilted her chin up, his dark eyes blazing in the dim light. Then let them. I've spent 15 years being what everyone expected, a killer, a monster, the Ice King. But with you, I'm just a man. His voice cracked. A broken man trying to be whole. You're not broken, Naomi whispered fiercely, her hands coming up to frame his face, feeling the rough stubble there. You never were. You just needed a reason to fight for yourself. You're my reason, he said simply, and kissed her again. If you're wondering whether Naomi just made the biggest mistake of her life, or the best decision, keep watching, because what happens next will leave you speechless. Hours later, they lay tangled in her bed, the city lights outside her window casting moving shadows across their intertwined bodies, painting them in alternating bands of light and dark. Dojun traced patterns on her bare shoulder, marveling at the contrast of his tattooed hand against her smooth, dark skin. At the miracle of his body having responded with such desperate hunger, Naomi explored his tattoos with gentle fingers, learning each design in the shifting light. The dragon? She asked softly, tracing the intricate scales. Family symbol, Dojun said, his voice rough from use, from emotion. My grandfather started the organization. 70 years of violence and blood, all inked into my skin. The phoenix? Rising from ashes. He captured her hand, brought it to his lips. I got it after the bombing, to remind myself I'd survive. And these? She touched the Korean characters on his ribs, feeling his body tense beneath her fingers. Dojun's expression went flat, his eyes focusing on the ceiling, his jaw clenching. Names of people I've killed, the ones I did personally. A reminder of what I am. How many? Her voice was gentle, non-judgmental, but he could hear the question behind the question, could feel her tension. 37. Each character a life I took. She should have recoiled, should have run, should have called the police. Instead, she kissed the tattoo gently, her lips soft against his scarred skin, and felt him shudder beneath her. Can you stop? Can you build a life without killing? I don't know if I know how, he admitted, his hand coming up to tangle in her braids to hold her close. It's all I've been for so long. Then learn, Naomi said fiercely, propping herself up on one elbow to look down at him in the shifting shadows. You said you wanted to change. Prove it. And if I can't? His voice was small, vulnerable in ways that made her heart ache. Then we'll figure it out together, she said simply and kissed him again. Morning came too quickly, pale dawn light filtering through her curtains, turning everything soft and dreamlike. Dojin had to leave before full sunrise, business calling, and he left a note on her pillow in strong, decisive handwriting. Had to handle business. Stay at the hospital today. You're safer there. The security detail will follow. Trust me. She did trust him, which terrified her more than anything. At the hospital, harsh fluorescent lights made everything feel normal again, grounding her in the familiar reality of medicine and saving lives. Ji-won took one look at her under those buzzing lights and grinned knowingly, her eyes sparkling with mischief. You slept with him. I don't know what you're talking about, Naomi said, but she could feel heat creeping up her neck, could feel the telltale flush she knew Ji-won could see. Girl, you're glowing. And is that a hickey? Ji-won's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper, leaning closer in the staff lounge. Naomi's hand flew to her neck, covering the mark she'd forgotten about, her face burning. Shut up. Oh my God, you actually slept with the mob boss. Ji-won was already pulling out her phone. Amara is going to die. Please don't tell Amara, Naomi begged, but she was fighting a smile, warmth spreading through her chest at the memory. Too late, Ji-won said, fingers flying over her screen. So, how was it? Her eyes were eager, delighted for her friend. Naomi couldn't fight the smile anymore. Couldn't suppress the warmth that flooded her at the memory of his hands, his mouth, the desperate way he'd held her. It was incredible. He was incredible. Like he was pouring everything he had into me, like I was the only thing in the world that mattered. I'm happy for you, Ji-won said, her expression sobering slightly. Just be careful, okay? This world he lives in, it's dangerous. I will be, Naomi promised, but the words felt hollow, optimistic in ways the cold reality of her situation didn't support. At 3 p.m., during a rare quiet moment, Naomi stood in the medication room, the fluorescent lights humming above her, casting everything in that familiar clinical glow. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Against every instinct screaming at her not to, she answered. Time's up, Dr. Adeyemi. Victor's voice was cold as winter steel. You're still with Park. That's disappointing. I'm not leaving Seoul, Naomi said, her free hand gripping the counter, knuckles going white. Then you've chosen your side, Victor said, and she could hear the finality in his voice, could feel doom settling over her like a shroud. Pity. I really did try to save you. The explosion rocked the hospital's east wing, the sound deafening even through walls and distance. The lights flickered, then the backup generators kicked in with a mechanical whine. Alarms screamed, a cacophony of sound that made Naomi's ears ring. She dropped her phone and sprinted toward the chaos, her medical training overriding everything else, her heart hammering with terror and purpose both. Think this is bad? You have no idea what's coming. Keep watching. The pediatric wing. Smoke billowed black and choking, the emergency lights casting everything in hellish red. Children screaming, crying, the sounds cutting through Naomi like knives. Fire spreading, eating oxygen, making the air thick and hard to breathe. The next 2 hours were hell incarnate. Naomi worked with mechanical precision, her hands steady even as her mind screamed, as guilt tried to drown her. She triaged under flickering emergency lights that cast bloody shadows, treating burns that made her stomach turn, working on tiny broken bodies with a focus that came from years of training and sheer force of will. A little girl with burns covering 40% of her body, her skin angry red and weeping, her screams echoing in Naomi's skull. A boy with a collapsed lung, his lips turning blue, his eyes rolling back as Naomi fought to save him. Twin infants who'd been in the nursery, so small and fragile in her hands, their cries weak and getting weaker. Through it all, she didn't think about Victor or Dojin, or the fact that this bombing was meant as a message to her. She just worked, her hands moving with practiced efficiency, her voice calm and commanding, even as her heart shattered with every child she couldn't save, with every small body that went still under her hands. When the immediate crisis passed, when the children were stabilized and transferred to the ICU, when she'd done everything humanly possible, Naomi collapsed in a stairwell. The fluorescent lights here were dim, one flickering intermittently, casting strobing shadows that made everything feel surreal and nightmarish. She pressed her back against cold concrete and sobbed, great heaving sobs that tore from her chest, her hands shaking uncontrollably now that the adrenaline was fading. Blood covered her scrubs, some of it dried and flaking, some still wet and warm. Ji-won found her there, sitting beside her in that dim, flickering light, pulling her close. Naomi, honey, you saved them, Ji-won said, her own voice thick with tears. You saved so many. He did this. Naomi's voice was broken, raw, barely recognizable. Victor, because I wouldn't leave Dojin, because I'm selfish and stubborn and children paid the price. You don't know that? Jiwon tried, but even she didn't sound convinced. I do, Naomi said flatly, her hands clenching in her bloody scrubs. This is my fault. Children are hurt, some are dead, because of me, because I couldn't walk away when I had the chance. Jiwon pulled her closer, her own tears falling now. This is not your fault. This is Victor's fault. He's the monster who planted the bomb, not you. But the guilt ate at Naomi, burrowing into her chest like a living thing, making it hard to breathe. When Dojin burst into the hospital an hour later, the overhead lights harsh and unforgiving on his face, his eyes wild with panic, blood on his expensive suit from forcing his way through security, she couldn't look at him. Her chest constricted at the sight of him, at the relief flooding his features, at the way he moved toward her like she was the only thing that mattered. You're alive, he breathed, and the relief in his voice, the naked emotion, made her want to scream. Children died, Naomi said flatly, her voice dead, her eyes focusing on a point past his shoulder, unable to meet his gaze. Because of your war. Because I wouldn't walk away when I had the chance. When Victor gave me an out and I threw it away because I wanted you more than I wanted them safe. Naomi, this isn't. Dojin started, reaching for her, but she stepped back, her body rigid with grief and guilt. Don't, she said, and the word came out harsh, cutting. I'm a doctor. My job is to save lives. Yours is to take them. I thought we could bridge that gap, but we can't. Her voice broke, tears streaming down her face, cutting tracks through the dried blood there. You bring death wherever you go, Dojin, and now children are dead because I let you into my life. That's not fair, he said, his own voice rough with emotion, his hands clenching at his sides, desperate to hold her, to fix this. Isn't it? Naomi's tears fell harder now, her whole body shaking. Go away. End this war. Make it right or leave me alone, but stop dragging me into your darkness. Stop making me complicit in violence. She turned and walked away, her shoulders squared despite how badly she wanted to collapse, and left Dojun standing in the harsh hospital corridor, something inside him breaking that had nothing to do with physical injuries, everything to do with watching the one good thing in his life walk away. Dojun stood frozen long after she disappeared, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like accusation, like judgment. Byung-chul appeared beside him, his hand gentle on Dojun's shoulder, but even that familiar touch couldn't penetrate the cold spreading through his chest. Boss, we need to move, Byung-chul said quietly, his eyes scanning for threats. Kozlov's people will be coming. They'll want to see the aftermath. I need to fix this, Dojun said, his voice hollow, his eyes still fixed on where Naomi had disappeared. You can't fix this by being here, Byung-chul said, his voice gentle but firm, understanding his friend's pain, but prioritizing his safety. You fix this by ending him, by making sure he can never hurt her again. For the first time in his violent life, Dojun felt the full weight of what his choices meant. The violence, the death, the impossibility of being both a crime lord and a good man, of having love when his hands were stained with blood. But as security finally forced him to leave the hospital, as he stepped out into the cold Seoul night, harsh streetlights casting long shadows, he made a decision. If he couldn't be good, he could at least protect the one good thing in his life. Even if she hated him forever. Even if she never forgave him. He would burn the world down to keep her safe. Can Dojun become the man Naomi needs him to be? Or will his past destroy their future? Don't click away. The war that erupted over the next week was brutal, conducted in shadows and back alleys, in warehouses and empty buildings where blood looked black under insufficient lighting. Dojun unleashed everything he'd built over 15 years of ruling Seoul's underworld, and he did it with cold, calculated fury. No mercy, no hesitation, every move precise and devastating. He hit the Jade Serpents first, their operations crumbling in 48 hours under systematic assault. Then he turned his full attention to Viktor Kozlov, and it was terrifying to witness. Every warehouse, every safe house, every business front, Dojun burned it all. He used every connection, called in every favor, spent money like water. The underground trembled. The Ice King wasn't holding back anymore, wasn't tempering violence with strategy. He was pure fury given form, and those who stood against him simply ceased to exist. Victor watched his careful plans crumble from his hotel room, the city lights outside his window, beautiful and uncaring, and found himself impressed despite the rage. Tell Park I want to meet, he told Sarah when she appeared like a ghost in his room one night. Gun in hand, but not firing. Just him and me. No weapons. Neutral ground. When Dojin heard, Byung-chul protested in the dim light of the penthouse, shadows pooling in corners. Boss, it's obviously a trap. Of course it's a trap, Dojin agreed, his voice flat, emotionless, his eyes cold. But I'm going anyway. Why? Because I need to end this. For her. Even if she never speaks to me again, even if she hates me until the day I die, I need to make sure she's safe. The meeting was set for an abandoned factory in Incheon, halfway between Seoul and the port, a place of rust and decay and shadows upon shadows. The space was vast and empty, lit only by moonlight streaming through broken windows and the distant glow of city lights, creating patches of silver illumination separated by deep darkness. Dojin arrived alone as requested, though he knew Byung-chul and Sarah had snipers positioned on surrounding buildings, watching through scopes, fingers ready on triggers. Victor was already there, standing in a pool of moonlight in the center of the empty space, his shadow stretching long and distorted across cracked concrete. No weapons, Victor confirmed, his hands spread, his posture relaxed but ready. Just talk. Just talk. Dojun agreed, stepping into the light, and they stood facing each other like gunfighters, like enemies in some old western, tension crackling in the cold night air. So talk. Victor lit a cigarette, the flame briefly illuminating his face in warm orange before dying, the tip glowing red in the darkness. You're in love with her. The doctor. That's why you're here. That's why you've torn through Seoul like a madman. I'm here to end this war, Dojin said, his voice level, his body coiled and ready despite the agreement. Because she asked you to, Victor said, exhaling smoke that drifted ghost-like in the moonlight. Because children died in a hospital and she blamed you for it. Because you can't stand seeing that disappointment in her eyes. Dojin's jaw tightened, the only sign Victor's words hit their mark. But he said nothing. The point is you've gone soft, Victor continued, studying Dojin like a fascinating specimen. The Ice King, Seoul's most feared crime lord, brought to his knees by a woman. It's almost poetic, almost tragic. If you're trying to provoke me, Dojin started, his hands clenching, but Victor cut him off. I'm trying to offer you a deal. He took another drag, the cigarette glowing brighter. I leave Seoul. Take my operations elsewhere. In exchange, you step back from 3 territories. We divide the city peacefully. Both of us walk away. Why would you give up? Dojun asked, suspicion evident in his voice, in his posture. You came here to take everything. Victor smiled coldly in the darkness. Because you're willing to die for her. That makes you dangerous and unpredictable, unstable. I'd rather cut my losses and rebuild elsewhere than risk everything against a man with nothing to lose. And what guarantee do I have you'll honor this? My word, Victor said simply, extending his hand into a shaft of moonlight. We're criminals, Park, but we can still have honor, can't we? Dojin studied Victor's face in the shifting light, looking for the trap, reading micro-expressions, body language, the tells that came from years of dealing with liars and killers. Then he saw it. The slight tension in Victor's shoulders. The way his weight shifted almost imperceptibly, the flicker of his eyes toward his coat. This wasn't about deals or territory or honor. This was about pride. Victor couldn't beat Dojin in open war, so he'd try to take him out in a meeting, face to face, personally. You almost had me, Dojin said quietly, his body tensing, preparing. Almost? Victor's smile faded, his hand moving toward his coat in sudden motion. You're here to kill me, Dojin continued, already moving, closing the distance faster than Victor expected. This whole meeting is a setup. You never intended to leave Seoul alive. Victor's hand cleared his coat with a hidden gun, but Dojin was faster, years of violence making his movements instinctive. He caught Victor's wrist, the gun firing wild into darkness, the muzzle flash blinding, the sound deafening in the enclosed space. They grappled, 2 apex predators fighting for dominance, crashing through old equipment, their shadows huge and monstrous on the walls. Victor was trained, military background evident in his moves, dangerous and skilled. But Dojin fought like a man with everything to lose, with nothing held back, with the desperate fury of someone protecting what he loved. They traded blows that would have felled normal men, bones meeting flesh with sickening sounds, blood spattering black in the moonlight. Dojin's fist connected with Victor's jaw, snapping his head back. Victor's elbow caught Dojin's ribs, cracking something, sending white-hot pain through his chest. They crashed through a table, wood splintering, both rolling to their feet, circling in the darkness. Through it all, Dojun thought of Naomi, her disappointed eyes, her belief that he could change, her voice asking if he could build a life without killing. He got Victor in a chokehold, his tattooed arm wrapping around the Russian's throat, cutting off air. He could feel Victor's pulse slowing under his grip, could feel the man's struggles weakening. One twist and it would be over. 38 names on his ribs instead of 37. One more death to carry. But Naomi's voice echoed in his mind, clear as if she stood beside him. Can you stop? Can you change? Do you want to be more than a killer? This is the moment everything changes. Don't look away. Dojun released Victor, letting him slump unconscious but alive to the cold concrete, his chest heaving, his knuckles bloody, his body screaming with pain and adrenaline. Sarah burst in with Byung-chul, their faces shocked in the dim light. "Boss, what are you doing?" Sarah asked, her gun trained on Victor's unconscious form. "Call the police," Dojun said, his voice rough, his breathing labored. "Anonymous tip. Give them everything we have on Kozlov. His crimes, his operations, evidence that will put him away for decades. His whole network. Everything we've gathered. You're turning him over to the cops." Byung-chul's voice was incredulous, confused. "That's not how we do things. That's not who you are." "It is now," Dojun said, looking at his bloody hands in the moonlight, seeing 37 deaths there, seeing the potential for 38 he just refused. "I'm done killing. If I want a life with her, if I want to be someone who deserves her, I need to be better than this. And that man doesn't add more names to his body. That man finds another way." "Are you sure about this, boss?" Byung-chul asked carefully, his concern evident. "Victor will talk. He'll tell the police things about you, about us." "Let him," Dojun said flatly. "We'll deal with legal consequences if they come, but I'm not adding another death to my conscience. Not tonight. Not ever again." The news broke the next morning, winter sunlight streaming through Naomi's apartment windows, golden and warm and completely at odds with how she felt. She sat on her couch in yesterday's clothes, still covered in dried blood she hadn't had the energy to wash off, staring at her TV screen. Russian crime lord Viktor Kozlov arrested with overwhelming evidence. His organization dismantled. Cooperation from anonymous sources led to dozens of arrests across Seoul. The Jade Serpents, weakened and leaderless after systematic attacks, sued for peace with Park Do-jun's organization. Seoul's criminal underground reshuffled overnight. And through it all, as the newscaster spoke in serious tones against footage of police raids, Do-jun waited for Naomi to call, sitting in his penthouse surrounded by morning light, his phone clutched in bandaged hands, his body aching from the fight, but his heart aching more from her absence. She didn't call. 3 days passed like years. Do-jun sat in his penthouse office, golden afternoon light streaming through windows, dust motes dancing in the beams, and stared at his phone with an intensity that made his lieutenants uncomfortable. "You look pathetic," Sarah observed, her voice gentle despite the harsh words. "I feel pathetic," Do-jun admitted, and the honesty of it surprised them all. "So go to her." "She doesn't want to see me." "You don't know that." "Yes, I do," Do-jun said, his jaw clenching. "She told me to end the war or leave her alone. I ended the war. Now I'm leaving her alone." "That's the stupidest logic I've ever heard," Sarah said bluntly. Byung-chul entered with Ji-won, who'd become a frequent visitor, their presence bringing warmer energy to the cold penthouse. "Your friend is miserable," Ji-won announced without preamble, settling onto the couch in a shaft of sunlight. "She works herself to exhaustion, won't talk about you, pretends everything's fine. But she's breaking, Do-jun. I can see it." "So what do I do?" Do-jun asked, and the vulnerability in his voice, the desperate need for guidance, made them all exchange glances. "Grand gestures," Sarah said firmly. "Women love grand gestures. Something big enough to show her you've really changed." "I'm not good at gestures," Do-jun protested weakly. "You declared war on 2 criminal organizations for her," Taemin pointed out, arriving with coffee, the rich smell filling the room. "I think you can manage a speech." "What kind of speech?" "The kind that tells her you love her and you've changed, and you want to build a life that doesn't involve violence," Ji-won said, her eyes warm with encouragement. "The kind that makes her cry happy tears and remember why she fell for you in the first place." So Do-jun planned. And when he executed 3 days later, the late afternoon sun painting everything gold, it was spectacular. Naomi finished her shift exhausted, the familiar weight of a particularly brutal surgery sitting heavy on her shoulders. She'd saved the patient, a teenage boy caught in crossfire, but the reminder of violence sat bitter in her mouth. She pushed through the hospital's main entrance into golden hour light and stopped dead, her breath catching in her throat, her heart stuttering in her chest. The entire courtyard had been transformed. Hundreds of white roses lined the pathways. their petals glowing warm in the golden light, creating rivers of white against green grass. A string quartet played something soft and romantic, the music drifting on the evening air. And at the center of it all stood Dojin, bathed in that perfect golden light, in a simple black suit with no weapons visible, no guards flanking him, just a man waiting for a woman, vulnerable and exposed. The entire hospital staff and half the patients watched from windows and doorways, faces painted gold by the setting sun, anticipation crackling in the air. Jiwon materialized beside Naomi, giving her a gentle push forward, her smile warm and encouraging. "Go," she whispered. "This is insane," Naomi breathed, her hands trembling, her heart racing, torn between running toward him and running away. "This is love," Jiwon corrected softly. "Now go get your man." Naomi walked slowly through the roses, her footsteps crunching on gravel, golden light painting her skin warm and alive, her heart thundering so hard she could barely breathe. Dojin watched her approach, and she could see vulnerability in his eyes, fear that she might reject him publicly, hope that she might forgive him, love so naked and desperate it made her chest ache. What happens next will either heal them or destroy them forever. This is episode 2 of a 3-part series. If you've made it this far, you're invested in Dojun and Naomi's story. So here's what I need you to do right now. Hit that like button if this story has your heart racing. Drop a comment telling me, do you think Naomi should forgive him? Can a killer truly change for love? Subscribe to this channel and turn on that notification bell because episode 3, the finale, drops soon, and you do not want to miss how this ends. Will they get there happily ever after? Or will Dojin's past destroy everything? The finale will answer everything. Like, comment, subscribe, and turn on notifications right now. Episode 3 is coming, and it's going to wreck you in the best way possible. I'll see you there.